There it is.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to call the order, the public hearing for the CDBG-CV block grant. Bridget, you're up.
Yes, thank you. This is.
Oh, wait, we got to have roll call.
Correct.
Amy, call the roll.
Mr.
18 Victor.
Amrhein,
Here.
Mr. DeLeone,
Here.
Mr. Ferrara,
Here.
Mr. Kuhar,
Here. 18 Victor thing. On.
Ms. Rosenberg,
Here.
Ms. Shaffer,
Here.
Mr. Sidoti,
Here.
Mr. Turner,
Here.
Mr. Wallach, or Tracy Wallach.
Need a motion to excuse Tracy Wallach.
To excuse.
Second,
I'll second it.
no discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
No.
Thank you. Bridget, you're up.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. This is the first of two required public hearings for proposed substantial amendments to the Community Development Block Grant Program Year 2019 and/or Program Year 2020 Annual Action Plan for the allocation of $178,696 in Community Development Block Grant Coronavirus funding awarded to the City of Kent through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and under the authority of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, also known as the CARES Act. The hearing provides the city with the opportunity to present the public with information regarding the special allocation of the $178,696 in CDBG funds. The city is still awaiting the receipt of program-specific guidance regarding the expenditure of these funds from HUD, but it is anticipated that the funding can be applied to short-term emergency assistance and the expansion of public service programs, including but not limited to short-term forgivable loans to small businesses which are owned or employ low to moderate income persons adversely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, direct assistance to food pantries and emergency homeless centers, and other CDBG eligible projects and activities that can assist with mitigating the adverse effects of the COVID-19 pandemic.
All right, thank you, Bridget. I'm supposed to at this time ask if there's any comments from the audience, but I don't think so. So with that being said, the public hearing is closed. Thank you. We're adjourned. I'm going to call order the annual joint meeting between Franklin Township and City Council for the cemetery. Amy, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Amrhein,
Here.
Mr. DeLeone,
Here.
Mr. Ferrara,
Here.
Mr. Kuhar,
Here.
Ms. Rosenberg,
Here.
Ms. Shaffer,
Here.
Mr. Sidoti,
Here.
Mr. Turner,
Here.
Ms. Wallach.
Tracy Wallach needs to be excused.
Move
To excuse. Or second, either one.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. The first,
Oh, we have three more people. Mr. Benjamin. Oh, I see him.
Well, he's
I'll
muted.
unmute him.
Muted.
Hi, Mr. Benjamin.
Yes.
Hello.
You're good.
Here.
Ms. Hannah,
Here.
Here. All right.
Mr. Swan.
Present.
All right. Here we go.
all right. The first part of business is the Franklin Township trustees have a motion for their representative on the cemetery board.
I make a motion to nominate Keith Benjamin into that role.
Second there.
I will second that.
All right, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you. I need to authorize the draft for 2020-31, 2020-32, 2020-33. Is there a motion from the floor?
So moved.
Second.
Second, is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Would the clerk read draft number 2020-31 in title only?
Draft number 2020-31, a joint resolution of the Board of Trustees of Franklin Township and the Council of the City of Kent, Ohio, pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 759.34, determining that the rate of tax is to be levied upon all the taxable property of said municipality and said township for cemetery purposes for the tax year of 2020 shall be and hereby is fixed in an amount equal to 0.50 mils for the city of Kent and 0.50 mils for Franklin Township and declaring an emergency.
Move suspension.
Second.
Second, please call the roll for suspension.
Mr. Amrhein,
Yes.
Mr. DeLeone,
Yes.
Mr. Ferrara,
Yes.
Mr. Kuhar,
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg,
Yes.
Ms. Shaffer,
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti,
Yes.
Mr. Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Benjamin,
Yes.
Ms. Hannah,
Yes.
Mr. Swan.
Yes.
Suspension passes. I need a motion for adopting this
Move
ordinance.
adoption.
Second.
Is there any discussion on adopting the ordinance? Hearing none, please call the roll for adoption.
Mr. Amrhein,
Yes.
Mr. DeLeone,
Yes.
Mr. Ferrara,
Yes.
Mr. Kuhar,
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg,
Yes.
Shaffer,
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti,
Yes.
Mr. Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Benjamin,
Yes.
Ms. Hannah,
Yes.
Mr. Swan.
Yes.
2020-31 has passed.
Okay, thank you. Would the clerk read draft number 2020-32 in title only? And Mr. Benjamin, I think you'll abstain from this one.
Okay.
Draft number 2020-32, a joint resolution appointing Keith Benjamin, member of Franklin Township Trustees, to the Standing Rock Cemetery Board of Trustees in accordance with the provisions of the Ohio Revised Code Section 759.36, effective January 1st, 2021, and ending December 31st, 2023, and declaring an emergency.
Move suspension.
Suspension.
Second.
Second, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. DeLeone,
Yes.
Mr. Ferrara,
Yes.
Mr. Kuhar,
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg,
Yes.
Ms. Shaffer,
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti,
Yes.
Mr. Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Benjamin,
The internet connection is unstable.
Mr. Benjamin,
Looks like he's.
He abstained.
He abstained.
okay,
Okay.
Ms. Hannah,
Yes.
and Mr. Swan.
Yes.
Move adoption.
Second.
Is there any discussion on adopting this ordinance? Hearing none, please call the roll for adoption.
Mr. DeLeone,
Yes.
Mr. Ferrara,
Yes.
Mr. Kuhar,
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg,
Yes.
Ms. Shaffer,
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti,
Yes.
Mr. Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Benjamin,
Yes.
Ms. Hannah,
Yes.
Mr. Swan,
Yes.
and Mr. Amrhein.
Yes.
Okay, 2020-32 is passed.
Congratulations, Mr. Benjamin. Would the clerk read draft number 2020-33 in title only?
Draft number 2020-33, a joint resolution granting salary and hourly pay raises to the personnel of the Standing Rock Cemetery and declaring an emergency.
Move suspension.
Second.
Please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Ferrara,
Yes.
Mr. Kuhar,
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg,
Yes.
Ms. Shaffer,
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti,
Yes.
Mr. Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Benjamin,
Yes.
Ms. Hannah,
Yes.
And Mr. Swan,
Yes.
Mr. Amrhein,
Yes.
Mr. DeLeone.
Yes. Move adoption.
Second.
Second, is there any discussion on adopting this ordinance? Hearing none, please call the roll for adoption.
Mr. Ferrara,
Yes.
Mr. Kuhar,
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg,
She's, Gwen, we can't hear your voice. for some
Oh,
reason.
I'm sorry. I said yes, sorry.
sorry, Ms. Shaffer,
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti,
Yes.
Mr. Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Benjamin,
Yes.
Ms. Hannah,
Yes.
Mr. Swan,
Yes.
Mr. Amrhein,
Yes.
Mr. DeLeone.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2020-33 has passed.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else to come before this meeting tonight for the joint meeting?
I do have
Hearing
some.
none, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
What do you want, Amy?
Mike had something.
I was gonna mention something about the wall in front of the cemetery, but I don't know if that's the proper way to do this now. I know we never get a chance to talk with the three trustees from Franklin Township. But I know it's on our agenda somewhere, and I just wanted to let them know that we're still pushing on that. So that's all I wanted to say.
Push too hard.
I think Jim Bowen has it on his schedule someplace.
I know,
saw
I
it.
just wanted to, I thought it was a perfect opportunity with all of us
Let
together
everybody know, yes.
to make sure that I am telling them, Keith. All right, that's, thank
I
you.
believe you.
We'll take note of that.
Thank you.
No other business for
No.
this meeting. We're adjourned. Thanks, trustees. You can drop out if you want.
Thank
Or you could say,
They're welcome.
What else is there to do?
Yeah, right. Might as well hang around.
All right.
I'm trying to figure out why my headings say Wendy Benjamin and Team Victor under Mike.
my son uses a computer more than I do.
I'm
All right,
ready.
We're going to go into our committee meetings. The first up is Health and Public Safety. Mr. Amrhein.
Yes, the item on my agenda is the sale of the police and fire VHS band radios.
Is Chief Tosco with us?
Yeah,
Yes, I
he
am.
is. This is actually fairly simple. I know he's on there somewhere, but he's got, you recall you guys were kind enough to approve the purchase of the sort of fancy Marks radios, the state-of-the-art public radios. And we purchased those over the last couple of years, the program, they're in use. And I have to say, it's great not to have to worry about a bunch of dead spots, which we used to have to worry about. And so that's great news. The back side of that is we've got surplus old radios that Chief would like to sell. He found a buyer, and we're just coming to you asking for your approval to sell those. Chief, anything you want to say specific to this?
No, these are police and the fire radios, and the quote is attached in the attachment. We do have about 30 extra police radios that they found the other day, so all those together will go together in one lot. And then one of the things that they do is wipe the programming, which we like. I don't like to sell those on the open as an auction, because then we have to go in and wipe the programming every radio. This way they do it, and we don't have to worry about anybody having that programming. I know we're not on our radio anymore, but a lot of other departments are.
Is there any other discussion?
Seeing none.
Jack?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm kind of like not used to this. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I'll ask Chief. I assume that this money's going to go right into the fire department fund then.
Fire,
Yeah,
please.
the police radios will go into the police fund, the fire in the fire fund.
Okay, very good.
Unless you want to give me all the money, I'll take that.
Further questions?
Michelle will be happy.
Further questions? Nobody in the audience?
Okay, all those,
Move to approve.
Second. We'll get the hang of this.
all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, that's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Community Development, Mr. Kuhar.
Okay, like the first item, and I think the only item, is the proposed temporary moratorium on the Parks and Recreation development fees, either Hope or Bridget.
Yeah, let me get you started on this. I wish we were in person because this one is actually a little longer to explain, so bear with me a little bit. This actually dates back, for those of you that haven't been around recently when we've had some development projects, we have fees that developers pay that are calculated based on an ordinance that was passed about 8 or 9 years ago and updated, I think, in 2015. But and with the way it works is the developer pays a certain amount, and then the city is required by our ordinance to match that same amount. So a project may have a fee of $20,000 the developer pays, and then the city pays Parks and Rec $20,000 as well. So that's kind of the backdrop. Now, in the course of the last 5 years, it became increasingly apparent that that's a very unusual arrangement. Typically, the developer fees are paid by a developer and the city doesn't match that. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, at least until we were running out of money because of COVID. And so what we did is it was sort of on our radar screen as being something we probably need to talk to you guys about. We waited for Kevin to get here. We could talk to him. And again, we were sort of, everything got accelerated because of COVID. I think I've told you guys, we're anticipating a pretty sharp decline in revenues in the next 6, 9 to 12, 18 months. So we're busy trying to make cuts all across the board. And a little light bulb went off and said, hey, you know, if a developer comes along right now, I don't exactly got 20 grand to throw at a match, especially not when the law director, our professional certified accounting firm that we use for financial advice, they all tell us the same thing. You're not obligated to do that. It's unusual to do it that way. Maybe we want to keep doing it, but I think a couple of things that Bridget will point out here in a second, the fee calculation itself needs some work. So this is kind of the best time, in our opinion, to put a hold on that thing, put a freeze on it. It's up for you guys to decide whether you want to just freeze the city share or the developer share or both. It's kind of up to you. We don't have a strong opinion. I think in the memorandum, our recommendation was both, but we've had subsequent conversations that if indeed a project pops up in the next 6 months, or even shorter than that, which there is a chance of one, maybe two, do you want to make the developer still pay his share, but the city just be absolved? Anyways, I've said a little bit more than I intended to, but Bridget really has her finger on the pulse of this because she's been living it and she can give you a lot more details than I can. And Hope's been involved quite a bit too. So Bridget?
Yeah, this was updated. As Dave mentioned, the original ordinance dates back to like 1999, I believe, but we did some updates in 2014 to it. Most of those were to address like math errors and some other inconsistencies. It really didn't change the substantive structure of the park fee and the fact that the city matches the developer's fees. I will say community development actually has planning commission approve it, and we actually bill it at the time that a building permit is issued for a project, but the calculation is always done by Parks and Rec, and it's based on an appraisal that I think has been in place for a long time. We've had some developers question it. There also seems to be some inconsistencies where the park fee calculation is a little more advantageous to single family homeowners when they're in a subdivision versus, because that's calculated at the time of the subdivision versus somebody that, for example, does an infill lot. So we can see a discrepancy of someone that builds an infill lot in an older neighborhood that may pay $1,000, for example, in a park fee, but if they were building in one of the newer subdivisions, it may only be $600. So those were always inconsistencies that we wanted to address. And then the match issue did come up when we were having discussions with our financial advisor. So we definitely had this on our radar as something we needed to address. I think David Coffey was also in support of us looking at it and evaluating it. So it seems with the financial constraints we're dealing with, this might be a good time to put a little hold on it. And Hope, I believe, is working with outside counsel to look at some other options for structuring it. And I can let Hope take over for that piece right now.
Hi there. I do have an account set up with Walter Haverfield to help us go through this process if you pass this ordinance. What I'm hoping for is to get us to a point where any fees that we do charge are really bulletproof in terms of lawsuits, because I do look at this ordinance and it's kind of confusing how the fees are formulated. And I was really surprised when I came here and saw that the city was matching. I thought that was very generous, and the places I came from, there was no match. So I felt that that although generous, it is not necessary to make our ordinance stand up against a lawsuit. We can redraft it without the matching fees if you would like. And I would like you all to give us the opportunity to take a look at it, get outside counsel, and come back with a maybe it'll stay a lot the same, but we would like a law firm to take a look at it. And again, as Dave said, whether we put a moratorium on both of the fees, just our fee, and still make the developer pay theirs while we're looking at this, we'll do what you all want. We're just asking for the moratorium.
Hello, I would like to speak.
Go ahead, Heidi.
Thank you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't this have to do with like if a developer doesn't want to provide the green space for their own residents, or the people that are going to be occupying that, and this is a way that they can make up for not having green space? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It is the developer can choose to have open space, or this is a fee in lieu of.
Right. So this would if we put a moratorium on it, it might have the impact of discouraging green space. Or not giving an option for that green space requirement.
Well, I believe that the open space, or the option for in lieu of, is if there's no open space in the development.
Correct. Some developments do actually meet it partway with open space. Typically, the more cost prohibitive ones, the ones that have a significant match, tend to be the high density multi-unit housing.
Mm-hmm.
And they typically don't have the ability to provide the open space. So they're the ones that then usually pay the fee in lieu, and that is what the city matches.
Right. I guess
Got you, Roger.
I know.
if we put a moratorium on this, then what is the impact?
It would be just a short-term interim, and it would prohibit it depends on which way you do it, because the park fee could be suspended on both sides during the short-term moratorium while the legislation is vetted and updated, or it could be done on the city side alone. There have been some questions raised by developers with regards to how it is calculated, because it is a little convoluted. I can tell you that there were 2 commercial multi-unit projects that were on the calendar for Planning Commission this year. One, I received notification yesterday, is not moving forward, but the other one is.
Okay, so just a follow-up. So if we put a moratorium on the developer side, they would have no alternative to the open space requirement, or they would not have an open space requirement?
Well, it's actually not an open space requirement. So the zoning code dictates open space requirements based on the type of use that is being constructed, residential use. So this applies just to residential uses. So the zoning code dictates that open space requirement. What this is a separate ordinance outside of the zoning code 1911 that basically is to increase parkland as the number of residents were to increase. So while technically it is similar to open space, it's actually a separate and distinct requirement. So the zoning code requirements for open space, for example, would apply if they're in a zoning district that would require them to meet that. And if they, so the open space, you can't get around in the zoning code. However, this requirement under 1911 is if you're going to have this many residents and on this many acres of this type of residential units, you have to equal this much in acreage in land. And if you can't provide that anywhere, it doesn't necessarily need to be even on their project. It could be other areas they own, then you would pay a fee in lieu. I know it's a little confusing, but they are different.
Okay.
Yeah, is that it, Heidi?
For now, Hope has something to say.
Yeah, I had Roger ahead of you, and unless this pertains to what Heidi had to say.
I want to defer to Hope. Go ahead and defer to Hope. And
well, this has really nothing to do with open space. I just got a text from Dave. He lost his feed, and he'll be back as soon as he can.
Okay, thank you. Roger?
Bridget, realistically, it's going to take a while for our businesses to get up to speed and begin to generate some tax revenue to the city with the workers. And would it make sense if we put a moratorium for a year and give you a year, you and Hope, a year's time, and the moratorium would be only on the city side because of the reduction in tax revenue, and we come back like next spring and give you some time to look at how we may rewrite the whole thing?
I can defer to Hope, but I think we can actually get legislation crafted sooner than that. And I would actually like to do that because it deals with all residential, not just the developer. You have to remember the individual homeowner has a responsibility here too. So to make it, add the clarity to the calculation and how we get there, determination on that match issue that Hope and Dave both referenced, I would prefer this actually to be accelerated. With regards to setting aside the match requirement on the city, of course, that is not a question for me. That would be fine. But I would prefer actually to move it along quicker than a year. Hope, what are your thoughts?
I agree with you. I think we can get this done in 6 months. If we run into a snag, we can always come back and ask for an extension.
So, John, could I ask another follow-up? So we actually have two decisions to make, then, is that correct? The one decision would be to put a moratorium on the city contributing. And the second one would be the rewrite that would not include the city, but we could come back and review that another time. Would that make sense? What I'm driving at is this: if we're going to try to save some money from the city standpoint, which I think is critical at this point, can we do both? Would we need two separate motions to make that work?
I think that's not it's right now. Just the one is. Is that correct, Hope?
Well, I guess what we're looking for is, one, will you allow us to place a moratorium on so we can take a look at this? The second one is, what are we putting a moratorium on? And that's what we'd like to get feedback from you. So I guess, Roger, you are right. Because if there's a difference of opinion among you as to whether or not you want to put the moratorium just on the city or on both, that would be one motion. And then the next motion would be, well, the first is the moratorium, and then the second is who's going to get the moratorium put in place, which parties.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have another question if nobody else does.
Go ahead.
Okay. Anybody else have questions?
No?
Right.
Well, yeah. I was wondering, one of them then is based on an economic savings to the city, but the other one is based on a situation that we have a more technical issue with the way that the payment is scheduled, or the formula that we have currently in use, that is maybe untenable from the standpoint of legally? And you're indicating before that this has been brought up as being a concern of developers.
Correct.
Okay, so the two items are the one, which is from our standpoint, is as the city looking at our current fiscal situation, how can we help stem the tide on revenue? And the other one with the other situation is whether or not we're able to create a clear formula going forward. And your suggestion, I think, Hope, was that the latter is something we should be considering as well, that we need to do some cleaning up on that.
Yes, yes, I do.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a question.
I have a comment when we're
Go ahead.
ready for.
No question?
I have a question.
Okay.
Okay, so couple things on the moratorium. If we put a moratorium on this and then we have a giant housing development go in, can we make it retroactive then to ask for the parks fee? Or and the second question I have is related to that, is what kind of revenue loss are we looking at for the parks? Is this a you know, a major bucket, or is this sort of like just a little slush fund kind of thing?
Well, on the first question, we can't, if we put a moratorium on it and then get a big housing development, we can't in 9 months go back and say, oops, sorry, developer, you owe us this money. We can't. A moratorium is a moratorium. And the second one, Bridget, you'll probably have to help me.
It varies. It's linked to the number of occupants and the nature of the residential dwelling unit. So for example, for a multifamily, that's a rent per bed model for the student housing projects, for example, those were high density. So the fees were extensive considering the amounts. For example, I have a couple 3, 4, 5 flats, which was 282 units, although I think they actually went up to 288 at the end. The fee was $86,400 for the developer and $86,400 for the city. So those higher density projects, which I can tell you as of right now, there are absolutely none even presented to us for conceptual discussion at this point. So if the moratorium was limited to 6 months, it is highly unlikely anything like that would occur, especially with regards to the university being in the situation it is because of COVID. It's just not something developers weren't even coming to us last year, let alone right now. But for the smaller projects, for example, a lower density, for example, a Maplebrook, that fee was $26,850, and we matched that same amount. So that would be going to parks. Both of those basically that fee times 2. Now, if you look at just an average year where we don't have a large project, those park fees tend to be lower. For example, we had a project on Adrian, and you know that was like $700. So those are smaller infill but that's already been approved subdivision. So that fee was identified when that entire subdivision was accepted and platted. So it varies by who's building and what.
Okay. That
John?
answer your question? Roger.
Yeah. I want to make sure I have this clear in my mind, and so I'll see if I have this question correct. It came from Heidi's response. Is it feasible to have 2 motions? And the first motion would be to, as Robin said very clearly and eloquently, to protect the city finances and quite candidly, to protect the investment of the taxpayers in this city that use our parks and everything. Can we have one motion that would put a moratorium on the city's match to any project? And then the second motion be, can we make a motion that would ask Bridget and her crew and Hope to redevelop the fee, redevelop how we calculate that fee effectively, and then come back to us? Can we do that? Would that work for both of you?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Robin, you had something?
No.
No, okay. Anybody else?
Well, I'm not hearing of the moratorium part of your second part, Roger. I mean, yes, we want this to be recalculated, but are we willing to take the risk and also take a potential hit to the Parks Department income of putting a moratorium on this? So I guess the moratorium word either has to go in that motion or not.
John?
Okay, Roger.
Heidi, what I'm suggesting, Heidi, is this. We put a moratorium on the city's share from this point on, and maybe we put we sunset it. Maybe in a year's time, we come back and look at it if the finances are, in good shape.
Mm-hmm.
Then we make a second motion. I'm not saying we put a moratorium on developers. Quite the opposite. I'm saying that the developers continue to pay that fee, while we give Bridget and Hope 6 months time or 4 months, or maybe they'll get it back in 2 weeks and say, okay, we have a different way of calculating it and we have a new ordinance. Maybe my question wasn't clear. I just think that, I think it's fair to the taxpayers, in my opinion, if the developer pays those fees. And it's also fair because the city is going to have revenue difficulties until businesses get up and running, and it's going to take at least a year. So I guess that was my question. Can we have two separate, protect at least part of the revenue stream for our Parks and Rec, and at the same time help the city out in terms of not having to match it? Maybe that's a better way of putting it, if that makes sense.
And the answer is yes.
Yeah. I think we got this now. Does anybody want to make a motion?
I'm just helping Heidi out. Come on.
Back to council, Roger.
I'd like to make a motion that we put a moratorium on the city's matching, and I guess we need a second motion. We need to vote on that before we do the second half of Roger's, which is to allow time. So I'd like to make that motion, that a moratorium only on the city's part of the matching.
Okay, is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
I have
Any
a
more
comment.
discussion?
No more discussion.
I have
Okay.
a comment. So I have a comment. Or are we
Not
voting
yet.
first?
No, you can.
Oh, that's right. Oh, wait.
Motion on the floor. All in
You
favor?
can make a comment.
No, she can have a.
Whoa, John. It's all part of it now.
As long as it pertains to the motion. Right, she can comment as long as it pertains to the motion.
Yeah. Okay. So our Parks and Rec is also undergoing. I like this motion because I believe that the developers, I don't want to leave money on the table should a developer come along. Our Parks and Rec are also suffering from a severe economic fallout from this COVID pandemic, as is the city. So I do agree with Roger that it is very responsible. We have to tighten the belt, but not 100% completely leaving Parks and Rec in the lurch. At some point, we're going to have further discussion down the road where we can replace these funds or find some other alternative way to fund our Parks and Rec, because it has been a priority for residents to have some of these capital improvements that the Parks and Recs have done, but then they're going to need, some maintenance. I don't want to leave Parks and Rec with a complete cutoff of it. So I agree with Roger, and that's why I'd like to support, only put a moratorium only on the city's matching, and give, the second motion then for time to readjust and make sure that this formula is appropriate.
Okay,
Yeah.
more discussion, Heidi?
Yes, yes. I just want to say, well said, Gwen. But we might also consider that the moratorium could become permanent, depending on, what the recommendations are and, whether, what other communities are doing. Because, it is kind of a surprise that, we have to bear the cost of a big development coming in so many ways, plus this. So we might consider that, there might be different possibilities coming down, but the moratorium right now is a very good idea to, stop the bleeding, basically.
Okay. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Opposed, same side. It passes. Anybody have any more motions?
I'd like to make a motion, John.
Okay, Roger.
I'd like to move that we direct Bridget and Hope to review the ordinance as it stands now, as it relates to the calculation of the parks fee, the fees that we charge, and to come back to council with a recommendation for revision.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
No, I just think this makes good sense. That was, I really thank Bridget and Hope for doing this for us.
Okay, any more
Agreed.
discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Same sign, passes, and that concludes Community Development Show for the evening.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Kuhar. Mr. DeLeone, Finance Committee.
Yes, a proposed ordinance to apply for COVID-19 grant funds.
Yeah, and after free floating in cyberspace, I'm back. So after my terrorizing loss of connection here, I'm back. And this one actually came up because John is, the fire department's got a grant they're trying to put together, and they need a resolution in support of that from the governing body, which would be you all. And so we would like that, but it actually kind of, another light bulb went off, and we're starting to see a lot of really short-term funding opportunities come along that have short turnaround times, and we may not be able to get in front of you, but we don't want to leave any potential grant, unapplied for because we couldn't get in front of you. Because candidly, 99.9% of the time, I think you're going to say, yeah, if you can get more grant monies, go get it. So Hope came up with the idea of maybe you giving us sort of blanket authority to apply for grants that are COVID-19 related, so that we won't get out of sequence and be able to, we wouldn't have to hold something back just because we didn't have the time to get in front of you. Kind of goes back to the point we just made. We're trying to stop the bleeding, as Heidi said, and anything we can do to bring in some more Band-Aids would be great. Hope, did you want to talk that through? Or John? I know John's still on too.
Well, the more general ordinance that I'm requesting is very similar to the ordinance that we brought before you last month, where you allowed us to accept all donations that come our way so that we didn't have to keep coming back and coming back. Now, there may be a time when the general ordinance that we're asking you to approve, if you do that, may not be enough. There may be an agency out there that will want something more specific to their grant, and in that event, we will come back to you. But we're hoping that as far as the general ordinance, that we can use that from here on out. And then John has a specific one.
Yeah, so Dave made a good point. There's going to be more coming down the pike. This one here is Congress authorized $100 million. And this one is personal protective equipment specifically for the COVID-19. And for example, the fire department has spent almost $22,000 on PPE and some disinfecting, decontamination services and products related to COVID. Generally, these grants are administered through FEMA. They're Systems to Firefighter grant, and they are 90% is paid for by FEMA, and the other 10% is a local matching grant. So under the incident command system, we are going to include everything that the city purchased under the ICS system. So we've got probably another $12,000 citywide that we spent on top of this. And then in addition, we're going to order some other equipment soon that will be lumped into this. So this grant is actually equipment you purchased already and also future purchases. And then there is a push through the fire service to get another $5 billion for local communities to be pushed through the fire departments. And we'll see more of that hopefully later on this year.
Is there any questions from council? I don't see anybody. Is there a motion? Anybody in the audience?
I would like to make a motion. I would like to make a motion, and I would like to move to provide a blanket authorization to apply for any COVID-related funding during this pandemic opportunity. Is that sufficient?
Second.
Second. Any more discussion?
Yes.
I second. Yeah.
I do. I feel I want to say that, you know, it's my honor to make this motion, because as a grant writer trying to jump on these opportunities, it's really important for the organization to be nimble. And I've been frustrated within my own organization at times because of the authority structure. And I think it's very important for us to trust in our staff to see these opportunities and take them, because they're coming and going like that. And I've seen some opportunities that I was hoping that the city would get on. So I feel like this is a really important motion to make. Thank you.
John, did you have something? Did you? Okay.
Nope.
Anybody else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Opposed? Okay, and the next thing is our.
Mike,
Yes.
I have just further on that subject, if I could just say, or ask if with this blanket approval, is there a dollar amount, Dave, that you would say at this point in time, the 10% match represents X dollars? I better talk to city council to get their approval. Is it $50,000, $100,000? You know, in terms of what would be the city's outlay for if we were to receive the match? I think there should be a dollar amount somewhere in there. Just, but I would defer to your common sense, to be quite honest. But I think it should be discussed.
It would certainly always be done sort of on a case-by-case basis. But I would say that the bottom line is quite simple. If we can't afford to match it, we won't apply for it. You know, I mean, but clearly with the steps that we're trying to take, the ability to leverage 90 to 10 is really, you know, so we won't go if it's, you know, real low and we can't afford it. And look, it's going to be fiercely competitive. Despite the fact that the federal government, the state government, they're all putting a lot of dollar signs out there, but man, everybody's applying. So like Heidi said, we really appreciate the flexibility, because I almost think they do it on purpose. I think they do really quick turnaround times to sort of filter out some of the people that can't act quick enough. So it puts us in a little bit better chance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so our second thing is the 2020 budget appropriations amendment. Is Rhonda here?
I am. I tried turning on my camera, but I think I'm being blocked by Amy. But I would like to request council to approve the amended appropriations that I submitted to the city manager, Dave Reller, in a memo dated April 30th. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions, council? Seeing, it's Roger, you have one? You lit up. Seeing any, nobody?
Hey, there she is.
There I am.
There you are. I have a question. I assume it's the one that we got in our packet.
Yes, the $50,000, yes.
Further questions? Back to council?
Move to approve with emergency.
I'll second that.
Discussion, anybody? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's all for,
Hey, Mike,
Oh,
Mike,
wait a minute. Wait a minute.
before you adjourn, we
Wait a
were looking
minute.
for, we were looking for the blanket motion and John's motion for the fire specific, right, Hope?
Yes,
okay,
Yes.
so we need to do,
a
what do you
motion.
need?
I need another motion authorizing the fire department to apply for the grants that John was talking about. They are the,
Oh, the extra ones.
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
For the
Okay.
PVE.
I'll move to authorize the chief being able to apply for those grants.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, now is there any discussion in the confusion?
I do have a question as well.
Yeah.
Does that include, we're trying to apply for a FEMA public assistance grant, and it's all in relation to the COVID-19. It's a 75% grant and a 25% matching. And we're trying to apply for this possibly tomorrow.
We already made that motion.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah, I assume that we just passed that, right?
Okay.
Okay.
So it's the motion's there and it's been seconded. No more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is there any more motions we need?
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay, now I can adjourn, correct? All right,
Yes.
all right.
Okay, thank you, Mr. DeLeone. Committee of the whole, before we get into our business tonight, I want to bring to your attention that Mr. Rower had a birthday on May 5th.
No.
Melanie Baker has a birthday on May 7th.
Huh?
Tracy Wallach has a birthday on May 7th. And Mr. Amrhein has one on May 8th. Happy birthday to you guys.
Wow.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Give me some
Happy
cake.
birthday.
All right, on to our boards and commissions. It's very unusual what we're doing, but to do business, this is the way we have to do it. Because of the motion that Tracy made some time ago, there were supposed to be face-to-face interviews. We since then amended that during the epidemic and said that we'd go from the applications. So at this time, we won't vote today. We'll be voting on May 20th on these. And we'll talk about them in executive session. At this time, I'm going to ask Amy if she'll go down through the boards and publicly announce the name who applied. Amy?
Yeah, sure. For the Board of Building Appeals, we have David Hansford. He was a late application. I hope everybody got my follow-up email regarding his application, but he did apply for the Board of Building Appeals. For the Board of Health, we have Louise Frederick, who's a new applicant, and Kathleen Irwin, who is also new. And Kathleen has also applied for Civil Service, PARTA, and Shade Tree. We don't have PARTA and Shade Tree open right now, but just Civil Service. For the Civil Service Board, we have 3 applicants. We have Lee Higgins seeking reappointment. We have Marilyn Sessions, who had served previously on this board. And we have the new applicant of Kathleen Irwin. Then the Design and Preservation Committee, there's 1 vacancy, and we have 2 applicants, Howard Boyle II, who's seeking reappointment, and Gretchen Keeler, who's a new applicant. Equalization Assessment Board, there's 12 vacancies, no applications.
I'm off screen. Yes.
Fair Housing Board, we have 1 vacancy and no applicants. Loan Review Board, we have 1 vacancy, no applicants. Parking, 2 vacancies, no applicants. And the big winner is Parks and Recreation Board. There's 1 vacancy for the unexpired term that's ending January 19th. We have 5 applicants. Robert Zagenda and Kathleen Weiler. They've already interviewed for the positions back in December, if you remember those two. And then we have Kristen Berthium, Jillian Tipton, and Jason Church, all of whom are new applicants. And then the Stormwater District Review, we have no applicants.
Okay, while we're still in public session, is there anything from committee, any comments or anything? Okay, we're going to adjourn out of the committee session. And Jack, can you make the motion at hand?
Yes, we need to go into an executive session in accordance with Ohio Revised Code, paragraph 121.22, section G, item 1, to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official, or the investigation of charges or complaints against a public employee, official, licensee, or regulated individual, unless a public employee, official, licensee, or regulated individual requests a public hearing.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Need a roll call?
Mr. Amrhein,
Yes.
Mr. DeLeone,
Yes.
Mr. Ferrara,
Yes.
Mr. Kuhar,
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg, Ms. Shaffer,
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti,
Yes.
and Mr. Turner.
Yes.
We're going to include Hope in on this executive session, and Amy's going to mute everybody else. So it'd be just Council and Hope. Dave, did you want to stay?
I can.
It's up to you.
I don't need to talk, I don't think, but I mean, yeah, I'll sit around.
All right, Amy, you want to
Okay,
mute everybody else?
Yeah, I'm removing everyone else. So hang on one second here. Bye, everybody.
My screen's still showing live on YouTube.
Yeah, I'll have to stop that as well. So hold on one second.
Happy birthday, Dave.
Hi, Gwen.
Hello.